Two questions for you today and two solutions. What's your 20 in 2020, and do you have 2020 vision? Hello again, everybody. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. Let's start with our first question as you join Eli and me as we focus on the year 2020 and making it your big year. First of all, what's your 20? Well, what does that mean? Well, back in the day, there used to be a lot more CB talk, the truckers talking to each other, and they had code words for, code numbers for different things, like, 10-4 means everything's okay. Most people know that one. But one of the ones that they used to say is, what's your 20? What's your location? Where are you? Now, at the beginning of the year, New Year's Day, people make resolutions. They take a look back to see where they've been. To be very candid with you, I don't understand why people use the calendar to help them make decisions like that. I mean, do you have to wait till Valentine's Day to tell somebody you love them, or do you have to wait till Easter to become a religious person? I mean, these are things that you should have all year round. But since most people do it that way, I will succumb and fall and use that as well. Okay, so what is your 20? Well, Eli, one of the things about history is that if you don't learn from it, it's a waste of time. That's why they teach history to you in school. And I want to go back with you, historically speaking, today and explain why most people are acting like the ancient Hebrews. You remember that story from the Bible. The Hebrews were slaves in Egypt. Moses led them out. The Red Sea parted, and they wandered through the desert. All right. So what's the story I want to get at here? Well, they went into the desert. Moses went up to the Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, and he was gone for a fairly long time. And while he was gone, people said, "Oh, Moses isn't coming back. We don't have our leader." And, people got restless. And what they did was they lost their faith, and they built themselves a golden calf. And they worshiped the golden calf. And then when Moses came down, he took the commandments, he threw them down. If you've ever seen the movie The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, he threw the tablets down, then he had to go back up the mountain and get them again. And the punishment from the Lord in this story is that none of the people that were present at that time, their penalty was they were not going to get to go into the promised land. All right, so how does that relate to what we're talking about today? Well, let's think about it for a second. How many people out there are worshiping a golden calf? How many people out there aren't staying faithful to their faith? When I say worshiping a golden calf, what do I mean? They're on social media, they're distracted by video games. There's all sorts of different distractions out there, and instead of having a particular focus on the right thing, what do? They meander, and they get distracted, and they don't have a singular focus. Is that your location? It's the location of most people, and the reason why most people don't succeed is because they fail to have a singleness of purpose. And what's the punishment for that? Very simply, it's this. You get to wander around the desert for 40 years. From 25 to 65, those are your main working years. And what do most people do? They're wandering around the desert, and they're distracted, and they're not paying it, they don't have a particular focus. And more importantly, they never reach the promised land. They get to look over and see it. You get to see other people that have reached the promised land. You get to see it, but you don't get to step over and get into the promised land. And here's what's the most annoying thing about it completely is this. When the Hebrews were in the desert, how close were they to the land of milk and honey? How close were they to the promised land? Those people that are wandering around the desert are unbelievably close, but they don't even realize it. Isn't that the case with the 95% crowd? You're wandering around the desert, but you're very, very close to the promised land. You don't have a singleness of focus. You get denied entry. If you don't pay attention to history, it's not going to serve you. That's why they teach you these lessons. Look at it. Think about it that way. It makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about your vision in 2020. Do you have 2020 vision? Here's the issue as far as most people are concerned in terms of getting started, building momentum, reaching the promised land. And here's the key issue. You don't have an identity. You don't have a purpose. You've got to have a purpose and you've got to have an identity. You have to be going for something. There has to be something that you visualize every single day, something that's worthwhile, something that you make a magnificent obsession. And you've got to see that. And when I say 2020 vision, I'm not really being accurate. What you really need is 2015 vision. 2020 vision is normal vision. Things that normal people can see from 20 feet, you can see from 20 feet. 2015 vision is something that most people can see from 20 feet, you can see from 15 feet. So you want to have that clear vision, that clear focus, and you've got to own it. You've got to have that purpose. It's got to be a strong why. And how do you get that? Simple. You develop the habit of having some quiet, personal thinking time every morning where you can see something, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can taste it, where you make it a magnificent obsession. Now, one of the things that I often hear people say, some of the other pundits out there, is that we all have Michael Jordan ability at something. And I believe that. We all have some sort of outstanding ability. I'll tell you what we don't have. What we don't have is the Michael Jordan mindset. Now, if you want to find out what the Michael Jordan mindset is, I mean, you see him play ball, you see him get all excited, so on and so forth. But if you ever want to see what his mindset is really like, go to his Hall of Fame acceptance speech on YouTube. I've done that for you, and I'm going to go over it with you so that you can look a little bit into the mindset of Michael Jordan. You have Michael Jordan ability, he certainly does, but you need to have Michael Jordan attitude as well. First of all, he's a lifetime learner. He realized that as he got older and older and older, that his physical skills started to diminish. So what did he do? He worked on new moves. He worked on it, and instead of being the big dunker like he was in the beginning and relying on his physical skills, what he relied upon was his smarts, getting himself in a position, getting that particular shot. And he was great all the way through. So he's a lifetime learner. He had a forest fire in his mind that moved him forward. And I'm going to let's go over some of the things from his Hall of Fame speech. You'll see what I'm talking about. One of the first things he mentions, these are things that motivate him, his why, what gets him going. First of all, he's got that long-term vision. That's key. But what he did in addition to having that long-term vision was he had a short-term focus that helped him achieve his long-term vision. Let's go over some of his short-term focuses, okay? First of all, he didn't make his high school varsity team as a sophomore. He got beaten out by a gentleman named Leroy Smith, who was 6'7" at the time. And Leroy Smith was in the audience at the speech. He's got a big smile on his face. And Michael Jordan said, that moved me to I wanted to show Leroy Smith, I wanted to show the coach. And this is what Michael says, you made a mistake, dude, unquote. Then Michael Jordan gets to go to North Carolina. And when he's going to North Carolina, he's, one of the recruits, but there's another recruit. The other recruits, there were other recruits, but the big recruit was a guy named Buzz Peterson. Buzz Peterson was the player of the year. He ended up actually being Michael Jordan's roommate in college at North Carolina. But what did Michael Jordan say? He said, Buzz Peterson became my focal point. And I said, you know what? Who decided that he was the player of the year? He hasn't played against me yet. That motivated him. That got his fire burning. Dean Smith, the coach of North Carolina. One of the old jokes was, who's the only person that can hold Michael Jordan under 20 points a game? And they used to say Dean Smith because they won't let him shoot. All right, but Dean Smith was, a great basketball coach. And what Dean Smith, they were the favorite to win the national championship Michael Jordan's freshman year. So Sports Illustrated came in to do an article on them. And they had a cover story. And in the cover story, Dean Smith had 4 of the 5 starters in the picture. The only one that was not in the picture was Michael Jordan, because Dean Smith said, he's a freshman, he doesn't get to be in the picture. That made Michael Jordan's blood boil, and he used that as motivation to show people, I'm going to get this job done. Then when Michael Jordan got to the pros, his first coach was Kevin Lockery. Now, the way Kevin Lockery would run his practices is he would have the first team and the second team scrimmage against each other, and the loser had to run sprints. So what did he do? How did Michael Jordan derive motivation from this? Well, here's what Lockery used to do. He used to have the first team play the second team, and then midway through the scrimmage, he would switch Jordan to the other team. Jordan's thinking to himself, come on, I got all these points. And Jordan said, you know what? 9 times out of 10, when I switched to the second team won, and the first team was the one that had to run the sprints. One of Jordan's coaches, one of his coaches after Kevin Lockery, he had Phil Jackson as a coach, and one of his assistants was a guy named Tex Winter. Now, up until that point in Jordan's career, for the first 6 or 7 years, Jordan was just outstanding. I mean, people would watch the game. He was the one to watch, but the Bulls weren't winning championships. And Tex Winter came in, and he had a particular offense that he installed, and that was kind of the point where the Bulls started to turn around. And it wasn't so much Michael focused. I mean, yeah, they wanted to get the ball to Michael, but it was also getting the other members of the team involved. Well, in one of the games, the Bulls are down by about 10 points going into the fourth quarter. And Michael Jordan, who just had that unbelievable hunger to win, as we all know, that motivation, just said, the heck with this, I'm taking the ball and I'm going to get it done. And he scored 25 points in the fourth quarter, and the Bulls went on to win the game. And Michael Jordan points out, he goes, Tex Winter was never satisfied with what I did, and that actually worked to your advantage. If your mentor is not satisfied with what you do, it just drives you to go forward. But Tex Winter, after the game, came up to Michael Jordan and said, Michael, if we're going to win long term, you have to remember that there's no I in team. And Michael Jordan looked at him and he said, that's true, coach, but there is an I in win. And he smiled. But he knew that Tex Winter was right, that he had to become more of a team player. And I want to tell you one other story about Michael Jordan. The press was saying, this is before the Bulls started winning, 3 in a row. Then Michael took time off. Then they went 3 in a row again. All right, but the press was saying, yeah, Michael's really good. He's outstanding. He's got, he could jump to the moon. Air Jordan, but he's not Larry Bird, and he's not Magic Johnson. And that's another thing that motivated Michael Jordan to just bury those guys, and he did. And the last story I'm going to tell you about Michael Jordan's attitude relates to after the Bulls had won their first three championships. Michael Jordan decided that his father had been killed, and it was very upsetting in his life. And Michael Jordan decided he was going to retire from basketball and become a baseball player. So he's working out in Chicago with the White Sox, and he decides to go to the facility where the basketball players are playing, and I think Utah was in town, and so he went in to say hello and shake hands with some of his old friends, and he runs into a guy named Brian Russell, who was a pretty good player. And Brian Russell says to Michael Jordan, he says, I can't understand why you're playing baseball. And Michael Jordan had no ambition at all to return to basketball at that time. And Brian Russell asked him why he quit. And he said he was very disappointed. He said, because, I can guard you. I'm disappointed. I wanted to play you. I can guard you. If I see you in a pair of shorts again, all right, and that was the way he left it. So anyway, let's fast forward a year or so, and Jordan returns to the Bulls, and they're playing the Utah Jazz in the final. So Jordan returns, and he's at the center circle for the opening jump ball. And he turns to Brian Russell and he says, do you remember that conversation in 1984 when you said, I can guard you, I can shut you down, I'd love to play against you, I can't wait to see you in shorts again? Michael looked at him in the eye and said, well, you're about to get your chance. And if you remember how that series turned out, the very final play of the game was Michael Jordan hitting a contested jump shot against, guess who? Brian Russell. So here are the things that I want to go over with you and to summarize. With a purpose comes passion. And comes the obsession to become great. Focus comes from thinking of vision every single day. You want to have that thinking time. You want to have that long-term vision. And when you have that long-term vision every single day and you chunk down your activity to a small focus each day, one of the things that's going to happen is, because you have that singleness of purpose, that's going to send a message to the infinite mind. It's going to send you mind flashes, going to help put things in order for you with circumstances you can't predict or plan or even imagine, and you've got to be ready to take advantage of that. And that's where you have to be, is you have to have that identity. That's who I am, that's my purpose, that's my singular focus, that's my long-term vision. Steve Martin, the comedian, says, perseverance is a great substitute for talent. Remember, you're putting pressure on yourself, but it takes pressure to make a diamond. Pressure is a privilege. People don't see that. Pressure, as far as leadership, is a privilege. You in your life, you go through certain phases where you become sick and tired of becoming sick and tired. I know that happened with me when I, would see all these girls in high school that I wanted to go out, and I didn't have the courage to go and ask them out on a date or anything. And you see other people do it, people that you feel like, boy, I'm better than that guy, all right? And you say to yourself, you know what? I'm going for it. So go for it. Make it happen. And if you're having a difficult time figuring out where to start, focus on your strengths, things that you like doing. Start there. That's where you want to start. And then from there, figure out some way, some creative way to make your strength something that's going to move society forward, your wallet forward, your family forward. These are the things that are going to make it happen for you in 2020. So, know where you are and have that 2020 vision that's going to help get you there. And our thought for the day is an addition to help you get started. And it comes from another YouTuber, a gentleman named Arman Rao, who has a nice video channel on leadership. And he says, and I quote, "Plan as much as necessary and as little as possible," unquote. In other words, get to the starting line. Don't worry about the whole plan. Plan as little as necessary. Plan as much as necessary and as little as possible. And because we will never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's get out there, let's get started, let's make 2020 our year, and charge! I'm Eli's dad.